Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spurs from the Stands. I'm Sarah, and today here we are all smiles. And not only have we just progressed through to the final 16, it's actually Spurs from the Stands' third week birthday today. So we've been live for 3 weeks, and I just want to thank you all so much for all your support, for your love, for the likes, for the shares, for the comments, for the hypes. I didn't even know we could do that yet. So I just want to say I'm so thankful for all of you. We are strongly on the march, on the way to 2K. And I'm wondering if we can get to 2.5K by the end of the month. Well, not the end of the month, but on our 4-week birthday, which is next Thursday. So please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're interested in talking about Spurs and having some different perspectives. Generally, I'm a realist. So a lot of you are saying out there, you're toxic and you're so positive. But look, being positive doesn't mean being uncritical. And so today in this video, I'm going to break down the game of what happened yesterday. There are some comments that I wanted to touch on as well, but I'll probably leave those to the end. So stick around for those at the end because, yeah, there were some interesting comments. Some of you are very positive and some of you are still on the Frank out train. So let's see where that takes us. But just to recap on last night, obviously we know that the game ended 2-2, Tottenham Hotspur's sixth clean sheet in the Champions League. And look, we have no reason at the moment to be Debbie Downers because we have progressed. So let's not talk about the Premier League just yet. We can save that for tomorrow. And on that point, this is the first weekend I've done a Sunday game. And obviously, I'm going to the game on Sunday. So I'm just wondering, do you guys want to see the match prediction tomorrow, or do you want to see the match prediction on Saturday? So let me know on that one. Maybe I'll put something in the community tab because it's the first time I've sort of done this Sunday schedule. So I don't know, what everyone else's schedules are like, and, is it better to wait to hear more team news? I don't know how much is realistically going to change, and maybe we get some last minute transfers, but no noise at the moment. It's all quiet on the Western Front, but we know our Lange, he loves to work in the dark. So don't panic. Don't panic. He's got the lights off, but there is probably someone home. And look, one of the things, actually, I might as well say it now, because one of the things that I saw posted in the Daily Mail, it was the Mirror last night, was breaking down the Champions League money that we actually get as prize money for finishing in that fourth space. Crazy. I mean, guys, just listen to this. Just listen to this. You've got Arsenal top, Bayern, Liverpool, Tottenham, Barcelona, Chelsea, Sporting, Man City, Real Madrid. I mean, we are in the mix. And, it's just crazy because you never would have expected us to finish in top six, in the top eight, sorry. So yeah, Tottenham Hotspur, from what the Mirror is reporting, so I don't know how accurate this is, and they have quoted in pounds, but they've said that the prize money for finishing in the top four is 43.65 million. So there's an equal shares payment of 16.1 million. I presume that's for anyone in the Champions League. For the results, so we've got 5 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss. So that makes 10.2 million. I think you get different prize amounts for a win, a draw, obviously. Qualification to the round of 16, you get another 9.5 million. And for our league position, which is fourth, we get 7.85 million. So this is not something to be ignored because, look, we're all calling for the board to reinvest. And there's your prize money right there. You already know you've got it coming to you. So if you want to progress further in the competition, if you want to compete in the Premier League, then this is the time to be buying players, and you already have that guaranteed payment. So from that perspective, that's pretty good. And I also just want to say, before I get into the match itself, that some of you out there are still saying that, we've had an easy run and it was expected and we should have won all those games. There is no easy game in any competition, and particularly the Champions League. There is no guaranteed win. And look, City got beat by Bodo. They got beat by Leverkusen. PSV, Galatasaray beat Liverpool. Monaco beat PSG. Atalanta beat Chelsea. And then Chelsea went on to beat Ajax. And then they drew against Karabag. And then they beat Barcelona. So, Sporting beat Athletic Club. Benfica beat Real Madrid. So as much as you might think that we had an easy run, there is no guaranteed win. And the fact that we kept six clean sheets is nothing to be sniffed at. Nothing to be sniffed at. That is huge. And look, Vicario's in the race for the Golden Glove. Who would have thought it, with all the rumours going around that, we need a new goalkeeper in the summer. So look, it's all positive as far as I'm concerned on that front. And I have no qualms about the results that we've got. There have been some tough games in that mix. Obviously, we got beat by PSG. But in the main, considering our league form is so bad, you wouldn't have expected us to win half of those games. So, people were thinking that Dortmund was going to beat us at the end of the day. We went out there and we showed on the European stage what we're made of. So, guys, don't forget, as I said, I think it was in the video I did about the matchday atmosphere. And I spoke about sort of the toxic culture that's surrounding Spurs at the moment. And I spoke about how sometimes our reputation precedes us in Europe, because on that international stage, we are known as a club who competes in Europe. So look, we haven't been consistently in Europe over the past decade, but whenever we seem to get into Europe, we have a reputation that is upheld in these games. And we have some big game players. You have Romero. Mawani seems to be scoring more in the Champions League than he does in the Prem. So, and Xavi, he's also coming into his own. Udogi. So look, it's nothing to be sniffed at. I don't want to hear any but this, but that, because when you say but, we won 6 and we had 6 clean sheets and we got 4th. And when you say but, you are, negating the win. You're suggesting that it's not worthy. And look, these games, at the end of the day, when you go through a transformation isn't easy. When you're starting from scratch, and look, we're not building on last year, we are starting from scratch. Yes, we have some similar players amongst the squad, and we have some new fresh faces from last year as well. But transformation is not easy. We are in the thick of it right now. We are not the end product. And so, guys, have a bit of patience, because in order to build, in order to develop, you don't just start winning games back to back without putting in the effort first, without learning from the mistakes that you're making. And from what I can see, we are learning, we are developing as a squad, and we are growing. You can see the players are growing and they're getting better. So look, you have to be realistic. And I know it's a knee-jerk reaction that we want to have a change of manager because we're sick of seeing it not working. But on the flip side of that, you need to give it time and you need to allow for the evolution to happen. And the real test of going through a transformation is not how you are in the moments, but how you react overall, how you pick yourself up and how you push forward. And when you show that positivity, when you show that you're willing to compete and the players are up for it, that's what matters the most. Not necessarily the results, but your attitude. And look, I've spoken about the attitude of some of our fans, and you need, getting behind the team is only going to help the players. So this whole divisive culture, I think we need to have a little bit of patience and we need to be realistic. I'm not being toxic or toxic positivity here. I'm not being delusional. Yes, I'm generally a positive person and I'm not uncritical, but you need to look at it from both sides, because this is a new project that we've just come into. This has not been going for 10 years. And look, I know a lot of people don't like the way that Frank chews gum, but put aside your personal preferences for what flavor chewing gum you have. What matters is that you can win games. And if we can use this momentum to push into the weekend, to carry forward, to get ourselves in that winning mindset, and the fans can get on board with that, you're going to see a whole different team this weekend. you will see a whole different team this weekend. Now, obviously, we'll turn to the game this weekend and everything like that tomorrow. But I just thought I wanted to flag that because there have been some comments floating around, which I touched on later. So, look, let's do a quick rundown of the game. So, first 2 minutes kickoff, and we score that very first goal that gets disallowed. Xavi pokes it into the net, and unfortunately, Udogi does a foul in the outside of the box. Now, some people were saying, well, that should have been reviewed by VAR. I think it was a very quick check, and it was a foul. It was a soft foul, but it was still a foul. Now, we're all thinking at this point, oh no, we're not going to get anything from this ref. It's going to be that kind of game. And I think that reveals a lot about the fans' mentality, because you kind of felt as well from the players that they got a little bit frustrated because they really wanted that early start, that early front-footed push. And you could kind of feel in the back of our minds, we were all hoping, like, please don't let that be the moment where we drop off. And what's interesting is I'm in a few different WhatsApp chats about Spurs and Tottenham groups, some with friends, etc., etc. And it was very interesting that a lot of the chats were very quiet yesterday. So maybe that's because there wasn't anything to moan about. But yeah, when that happened, there was a lot of noise in the chats that was like, oh no, what's going to happen? What direction is this going to take? And then within another 8 minutes, so at the 10-minute mark, Xavi does a corner. Now, just to point out as well, Xavi is not typically our corner taker. Normally we have Tel or Porro or I think Kudus, when he was playing, he took some of our corners as well. So it's interesting to see Xavi take some of our corners. He might have taken some in the last game as well, in the last couple of games as well, but he's typically not our favoured set-piece coach. And I thought he had a great game in terms of set pieces. And do you know what? I'd even put him as our set piece guy instead of Porro. Obviously, Porro is going to be out for a few weeks. So let's see how that evolves. But Xavi does the corner, and Paulinho hits a header that goes wide. So that was very, very unlucky, because if that would have just poked a little bit more in, then maybe we would have been 1-0 up at that point. So we're all kind of feeling the tension. It's still 0-0 at 28 minutes. There's a little bit of mess that goes on inside the box. We managed to recover the ball, and Odegaard makes a fantastic hit, which unfortunately, again, hits the woodwork. It hits the right post. And look, that was very unfortunate for him, because I thought it was a great strike. And our little play before that, picking up the ball, you can see the connection at that point that's starting to develop between Xavi and Odegaard. And I think they have really good synergy. I think the way that they're sort of coming into their own as a pairing is really nice to see. So yeah, I think they're both developing as players, and that's really, really promising. A minute after that, their keeper makes a pass out. He messes up. It's all a bit messy at the back. Xavi manages to pick it up, and Santos makes a great save. So that was very unlucky, but it was very close to the keeper. It wasn't probably too much time to think about it or to poke it in other directions. And we are heading into halftime, 44 minutes on the clock, and Larson then hits the crossbar. And we're all kind of a little bit tetchy. We're a little bit nervous because we've been on the front foot for most of the game so far. And going into halftime at 0-0 kind of felt like we should have been ahead at least one goal at that point. So if we would have gone in at that point at 1-0, I think that would have completely changed the outcome of this game. So it was certainly very promising that we held on at that point to the 0-0. So halftime, now obviously Frank had some words at halftime. He must have laid into the players. They stepped up a gear when they came out in the second half. And you could see that because after maybe we were on a bit of the back foot at the end of the first half and kind of phasing out of the game a little bit. And obviously that's natural that that's going to happen as well when you're playing away from home. Frankfurt is an amazing stadium. Their fans are amazing. So you would expect that maybe at that point you kind of feel the momentum shift against you. So we come out second half, we're on the front foot, and Xavi has a set piece again. It goes long to Romero, and you could see that was something that was rehearsed. That was something that was practiced because we were doing that all game. Now Romero heads it back in. It hits Mwani. He manages to put it down just about and flicks it into the back of the net. So great job for Mwani. Great for him to get his goal. And obviously Frank said in the presser after he'd love it if Mwani wasn't just scoring against his old clubs. So, yeah, I'm glad to see that he scored. He needs confidence. Mwani needs confidence. He hasn't got the respect of the Spurs fan base yet. And I think he's struggling to settle into London life for whatever reason. It was very unfortunate that him and Odebear were in the crash the day before, but I'm hoping that maybe he can get a little bit of confidence together. Look, we don't know what's going to happen with him, and there's a lot of dominoes that need to fall before we close this transfer window. So we don't know yet if he's for sure going to be a player come the sort of second half of the season. But look, if he can score a couple more goals and support Solanke, because I think having Solanke back in the squad is going to give him the competition, right? Because Mwani was playing because we had no one else fit. So when Solanke gives that competition, then Mwani's really going to have to step up his game. And that's where it's going to matter. That's where you're going to see what he's really made of. So at 52 minutes, Frankfurt have a shot. It was a little bit of a clumsy shot, but Udogie was a little bit asleep at the back, and the shot comes in. It was a little bit of a fumble shot, and Vicario makes a very comfortable save. 60 minutes, Mwani makes a header that goes wide, which was also very unlucky. I actually thought Mwani didn't have too bad a game, and he makes that header that goes wide. And equally, again, it was probably a bit closer on the replay than I thought it was in real time because it kind of curled a little bit. And then at 62 minutes, Sarr has a shot that's saved. And 66 minutes, Xavi has a free kick that gets deflected. And unfortunately, we can't get that second goal into the back of the net. Things must be good because the sun has just come out. So 76 minutes, Solanke obviously gets his goal. He comes on the pitch around 17-minute mark. There's a really poor back header from Frankfurt. I think it must have just happened so quickly that I think Solanke caught them on the off. And look, the thing about Solanke is he kept calm, he kept composed. It was a great finish. Look, you're not going to see Richarlison do that because Solanke is such a poacher. He really is. He sees the opportunity and he just picks up the ball and manages to keep a calm head. And as I said in the last video, he's not the fastest player, but he manages to keep the ball at his feet. And rather than messing up and ballooning it over the bar, he makes a very, very cool, calm, collected strike that puts us ahead 2-0 in the game. And from that point on, nothing else too much happened that was of note, but it was a great finish from him. So I'm very happy that Solanke, look, 2 goals in 2 games for him. So the thing about Solanke is, you've got to remember, he's fighting to get back into the England squad for the World Cup. So he has got a lot to fight for. Solanke, he's going to be competing. We don't really have a second striker in the England squad other than Harry Kane. So, if Solanke can go on a run, I can see him getting into the England squad. So that is a massive push for him because the guy's ambitious. He's going to want to play for England this summer. So I think that actually works in our favour for Tottenham because we're going to see a lot of work from him, I think, to be quite honest. I think he's really going to be pushing to make a name for himself again. So all round, pretty decent game. I think from the outset, I was quite surprised from the statistics of the game to see that we only had 55% possession because it felt like we had more possession when we were actually playing. But our XG was 1.27, so not quite the 2 that we'd had in the game against Burnley. But we did have 15 shots. 6 of those were on target. So in general, you can't really say that we didn't have a good game. Like these European games, I know some people are saying that Frank has killed sort of that flair, but I don't think that's down to Frank. I think that's also down to the nature of the games that are being played. And Frankfurt couldn't get out at times. They were locked in at the back. And I think that's due to the way that Frank set up the team. We kind of almost had two different formations. Like when we were on the defensive, we sort of had five at the back. And then when we were on the offensive, you saw Udogie and Spence push up very high. And I think that secured us because they kept winning the balls higher up the pitch, which meant that we weren't so much on the back foot. We did have 3 big missed chances, but we had 90% accurate passes, 2 offsides, 5 corners, and we know that's a big part of our game. So to get those corners into the game is obviously something that Frank's worked in. That's a tactic, and I think that worked quite well for us. We hit the woodwork, of course. So we actually had 7 shots outside the 7 shots inside the box and 8 shots outside the box. And I spoke about this in the last match debrief that I did about Burnley, because I spoke about this, a very similar thing, that you're starting to see us take more opportunities outside the box. So I'm actually content with that. I'm content with that because, look, you're not going to get everything right the minute a new manager walks through the door. You've got a lot of young players in the squad. You've got a lot of new players playing together. You've got a team that's basically changing every single week in terms of its personnel. So to be developing at the back and to be keeping these clean sheets and to be having the confidence to take those shots outside of the box, I think is something that should not be underestimated given where we're at the moment. And if we can keep doing that, if Xavi can keep developing, if Odegaard can keep developing, then I can't see why, we can't start winning more games in the Premier League as well. Other than that, we had 7 accurate crosses. We had, so something my dad pointed out yesterday, because I said that we didn't have many throw-ins. And he said, actually, we did have more throw-ins in the second half. Maybe it was just the way that I was looking at the game. So actually, yes, we did have 14 throw-ins. So obviously that's a big part of our game as well. And in the main, I think we had a very good game, to be honest with you. Now, in terms of our actual lineup and the personnel, Vicario didn't have too much to do. He had that 1 save. But other than that, there wasn't too much passing out the back, because I think of the way that we set up and we pushed further forward. I think, that led to less, Vicario seeing less of the ball. So whether that was because of the way that Frankfurt set up, whether that's because we completely stifled Frankfurt, I think it was kind of a combination of them both. But overall, I think Vicario, he had a fair game considering there wasn't too much to do. Spence, sorry, I pushed my chair up. Spence, I thought he had a decent game. He wasn't the best player on the pitch, I would say, but he was very involved in the game, particularly when we were on the offensive and we were pushing up, obviously with our sort of wing backs pushing up. I think he had a very fair shot. He saw a lot of the ball. He had a lot of touches. He had 3 out of successful dribbles. And that was something that I brought up in the game against Burnley. Both his successful dribbles and his crosses need to be worked on. So I think as much as he had a very good game, I think that there's some of his gameplay, if he is going to turn out to be a right winger for us, or he's going to be a bit more of a winger in that sort of way that we play, I think crosses is going to be something that he needs to work on. Now, people were saying that we look secure at the back with Spence and Porro, but I do think that Porro's crosses are slightly better. So I think that the way that Spence can improve his game is he's very good at recovering the ball, but he's not always so good at keeping the ball when he has it at his feet. So if he can improve on that, I think that would be really, really good for us, and it would be really good for the team, because he makes these recoveries. But obviously, we want to see him winning more of his ground duels and winning more of his aerial duels to really become like one of those, I don't know, top 6, top 4 right backs at the end of the day. I think Romero, he was obviously man of the match. He had a fantastic game. He was very, very involved in our set pieces. You could see that was something that was definitely worked on. And given that we only had since Saturday to work on all of that stuff, I think that was definitely something that was planned. And you can see that Romero is like the man of the moment. And I love that for him. I love that Frank is also putting Romero in the limelight in that way, because it doesn't have to be Romero who's the guy that's heading it off the back post. We have plenty of other players. But his presence being in the box when we're on the attack really does make a difference. I don't know if it's something to do with these European nights, and maybe like because Romero has this... he has this reputation on the international stage. I think just him being on the pitch makes our competitors fear us a little bit more just by having his presence. But look, he created 3 chances. He also had a shot. So he made 6 defensive contributions. He had 1 successful dribble, 1 out of 2 long balls. He won 100% of his ground duels, and he won 4 out of 5 of his aerial duels. So solid game from Romero. Danso was not as involved in this game. What was interesting with Danso was he kept making that run up the left wing. I think sometimes we sort of changed formation a little bit, and what I saw Danso doing was very similar actually to what Mickey van der Ven was doing against Burnley, and kind of like pushing up and opening up the opponents from the back, and sort of pushing the whole squad, so we played a higher line in general and forcing their team back. So I think that really worked for us because we were playing on the offensive. Now, look, it's a very different game when you have counter-attacking football, because obviously you're going to see a lot more open play. So naturally, when you have a team that's playing very defensive behind the ball, and you've got one team that's pushing and has more of the possession, it's a very different, the game plays out very different. It's not going to be like one of these open games with loads and loads of goals, right? So he had 70 out of 72 accurate passes, Danso. He made some successful passes into the final third, and that's what I'm talking about, because, I think Mickey van der Ven had very similar sort of stats from the Burnley game. So I think Danso fills in very well. He also had an accurate cross, and he also did 6 out of 6 accurate long balls. Didn't win any of his ground duels, and only won 1 out of his 3 aerial duels. So perhaps some areas of improvement for him going forward. But in terms of, obviously he's not our starter. So fair play to him for bringing in that experience into the back line, for keeping a calm head, for showing his character. I think he is a really important player for us. Udogie, I think he had a great game. He played 89 minutes. He had 29 out of 29 accurate passes. Amazing. He also made 6 defensive contributions. Didn't have any accurate crosses, but had 1 accurate long ball, won 4 out of his 5 ground duels, and made 5 recoveries as well. So in terms of his sort of passing, he's a very concise player, Udogie, and I really like him. I think we've missed him a lot. I think it's been underestimated how much we miss him on that left-hand side. And obviously with that sort of inverted role, with him playing a little bit further up, I think that also helped to sort of stifle the opposition as well. Paulinho had a fantastic game. It's really done him some good. This is an example of a player where you can see him being rested has worked in his favour, because we know that he had a little bit of a knock a couple of games ago, and we haven't seen him make an appearance since. So I think it was really good for him to be back into the squad and play a full 90 minutes. And you can see that he definitely brings that experience into the team. And I like that he played next to Archie Gray, because I think that pairing, when you have Gray and Gallagher or Gray and Paulinho, as much as I think Bergvall is a fantastic player, when the reason why Bergvall and Gray work so well together is because they're both quite attacking minded and they're both very energetic. But to calm down the play, to keep control of our heads and keep control of the game and keep on top, I think that's where players like Paulinho and Gallagher really show their experience within the squad. So it was great to see Paulinho play alongside Gray. He had 89% accurate passes, so 105 out of 115. He also had a shot on the day. He made 8 defensive contributions. He also dropped back into the back line from time to time. Not so accurate on the long balls, 4 out of 8 long balls, so only 50% long balls accurate. But he won 8 out of 10 of his ground duels and won his only aerial duel as well. So great game from Paulinho, just in that holding position. The presence he has on the pitch, I think, really served us well. Archie Gray, I was a bit concerned about Gray. I have to be honest, because as much as I like Gray, as I've said before, he kind of feels like a player that's like, a player that can play in multiple positions, but is really like a master of none. And I like that he's sort of settling into that role a little bit more. It does take him a little bit longer to get into games. And I find maybe, or from my perspective, maybe at the beginning of games, I think having the experience behind him gives him the confidence, but it does take him a while sometimes to like get comfortable. And I don't know whether that's like I think that's like an inexperienced thing, right? I'm not saying he's a bad player. I just think that sometimes the occasion might get to him a little bit. I'm not sure. Maybe that's me. I don't know. What do you guys think? That's just something that I'm observing. But he had 53 out of 55 accurate passes. He had 68 touches of the ball, 2 out of 2 successful dribbles, an accurate cross as well, 2 out of 3 ground duels won, and he won his aerial duel as well. Odegaard obviously had a fantastic game, as we know. He made 33 out of 38 accurate passes. So one of the lesser players that had accurate passes, but I think that was often because he was playing in tight spaces. What I've noticed is him and Xavi like to play in quite tight spaces, and they kind of like, it's particularly Xavi, he tries to like thread the ball through. And I think in what we've seen in Europe, that comes off more successfully for him than when he's playing in the Premier League. And we often lose the ball quite a lot in the Premier League when he tries to do that. But I think he manages to recover it better when we're playing against European opposition for some reason. But back to Odegaard, he had that shot that hit the woodwork, which was unfortunate for him. One block shot as well. 7 out of 8 successful dribbles. And as I said before, I'm liking the synergy between him and Xavi. Sarr, now, we did have a bit of a funny formation at times because, do you know what? I'm gonna say something here and I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I think Sarr is better than Bentancur. What do you guys think? I think Sarr is better than Bentancur. And the reason why I say that is because Bentancur is a player who is average in his prime, whereas Sarr is 23. And I think they're of a similar level now, but I think Sarr's ceiling is going to be higher. And I think if Frank can really get the best out of him, and keep in mind, Sarr's been out the squad for a couple of months. He played at the beginning of the season. He had some very good games, Sarr. So I'm hoping that Sarr can also be one of the players that Frank's going to develop and going to nurture, because I really think that Sarr has some great potential. And you could see he was a little bit rusty. He had that shot that was off target. He actually had quite a few shots in this game, to be honest. His passing wasn't so accurate. He had 4 shots and only 1 was on target. So you can definitely see that, he is match fit, but he's a little bit rusty. Maybe he hasn't played so much football. And he had 1 out of 3 accurate long balls. 3 out of 4 of his ground duels won, 2 out of 3 of his aerial duels. So he was very involved in the game. But it wasn't his best performance. And yeah, I think that's largely down to him maybe having been out for a little bit. And I can see Sarr being one of our players who's going to grow into the system. And do you know what? Look, Bentancur's out. So I wouldn't even mind seeing games where you're going to have Gallagher and Sarr, or Paulinho and Sarr, and depending on the formation and who's fit and things like that. But look, I think Sarr is a good asset to our squad. He might not be, prime Modric at the end of the day, but I think he brings a lot to the squad, and I think he's still a young player. So he maybe needs a little bit of time to grow into that role. Simmons had a fantastic game, 62 out of 67 accurate passes, so 93%. He had 2 shots on the day. One was on target, one hit the post. Obviously, the keeper saved one. 3 out of 6 accurate crosses. So again, something that could be worked on. But he had 3 out of 3 successful dribbles. He had 5 out of 5 accurate long balls. He won 8 out of 11 of his ground duels. So look, he's not going to be the guy that wins it in the air, but I think he was very, very solid overall. And you can start to see the moments of flair that we've seen. It's almost like with Xavi, I feel like it's a bit like a light bulb that's like screwed halfway in and it's kind of like flashing, but like you just need that like final push for things to click and the light bulb to turn on. So maybe that's due to the personnel around him and having a bit more of that connection and the muscle memory and the training to know where your teammates are going to be, and that's when you start to see things click. So I think things are starting to click for Xavi, but maybe a little bit of a way to go until we see the real best of him. Mawani played 84 minutes. He had 10 out of 13 accurate passes, 3 shots, one was on target, 1 out of 2 accurate passes, didn't win any of his ground duels, and won 2 out of 3 of his aerial duels. So I think Mawani, look, he scored a goal. He's obviously not our best player. And then Solanke comes in and takes 1 shot and scores it. So it kind of shows Mawani up a little bit. But look, Mawani's okay as our third striker. You'd probably play Solanke, then Richie, then Mawani. He's not going to be our best striker, but he can play at that wide position as well. So I don't know if he's going to start the next game or if Tell is, but hopefully he can start picking up some confidence, because I think this was one of his better games. Wasn't the best, but was still one of his better games. And Thomas Frank, overall, fair play to him. He managed the squad well. He put Solanke on at 73 minutes, wasn't afraid to make changes. Scarlett came on as well, so he obviously came on and played on the right. Scarlett's an out-and-out striker. He's a young kid. I don't know. I'm not sure about Scarlett. Look, he's a good squad player. We need the squad players at the moment, particularly in Europe. But he's never going to be like our next Harry Kane, unfortunately. But he comes on the pitch, helps us see it out and keep that clean sheet. And obviously, Byfield made like his appearance, which was a couple of minutes as well. He wasn't really too involved in the game, but just thought we'd give him a shout out because great to see some youngsters coming into the squad. So that was the game in full. What did you guys think of this game? How are you guys feeling? I said I was going to read some comments. But okay, let me just do one quick comment, because look, most of the comments were pretty positive. But there was one comment from Paolo Marotti. So hi, Paolo. Thanks very much for your comment. And just to quickly say, he said 3 important things to point out why Frank should still be sacked. He said 14th position in the Prem in his first season, embarrassing first round elimination in both domestic cups. Well, just to say, the Prem season isn't over yet. So I think it's a bit premature to be saying that we've finished 14th, because we haven't finished 14th yet. The Prem's not over. So that's a bit of a hasty judgment. Yes, we got eliminated in both rounds of the domestic cups, but I think that's also because the squad is still clicking, as I said at the very beginning of this. The squad is still clicking. They're still finding their feet. They're still finding their partnerships. And so you do have to give them a little bit of grace and time to find what works and what's not working. And as long as they're improving and game on game, then for me, that's not really too much of an issue. And I'm happy to say that I'm going to reserve my judgment until the end of the season, depending on where we actually finish. I think it's too premature to be saying that we're going to finish 14th because anything can happen. Look, we could finish 5th and we could equally finish 17th. So 14th could be good and it could be bad. We don't know that yet. So I'd say hold your judgment. And also, he said, only the defensive players have improved because of having a defensive coach. He's killed attacking players and our creativity for poor, predictable football. Now, I wouldn't say it's predictable, and I definitely disagree that it's only our defensive players that have improved. I think Odebear's improved. I think Xavi's improved. I think Solanke, when he gets into his flow, look, we've seen the best of Richie this season, and he's been injured. He hasn't been able to have a consistent run. So, look, he's out now, but I think he started off pretty good for us. Kudus, we also saw him. Archie Gray, I think he's developing. Bergval, he's also coming into his own. So I think that's a bit harsh to say that it's only our defensive players that have improved, to be honest. That's my personal opinion. What do you guys think in the comments? Paolo also said he has consistently disrespected our players and club for the feats we achieved in winning the Europa from his first interview when he got the job by alluding that it meant nothing thanks to finishing 17th. I don't really take that as disrespect. I don't think he's disrespecting us because it's not a lie. Like, it's true. We finished 17th. Like, he's not disrespecting us. He's just speaking facts. And look, we don't like to hear it because it's painful. It's painful to hear someone go, well, you finished 17th last season, so what do you expect? But that is the reality of where we're at. And that's part of the problem. Our fans expect us to somehow change manager, and just because we won the Europa League to finish third in the Premier League, like, that's just not going to happen. You have to be realistic about where this squad is at, where our squad depth is at. The amount of games that we've got, the schedule that we've got. And as I said at the beginning, look, Liverpool lost games in the Champions League, Chelsea lost games, Newcastle lost games. So no game is a given. No game is a given. And look, I don't think he's disrespected our players. I think he's being realistic. He called out Mawani last night, and sometimes players need calling out so that they can perform better and hold themselves to higher standards. So I don't really have a problem with that. Look, I don't agree with everything Frank says, and I don't like it when he says, oh, it was a good game when it clearly wasn't. But from his perspective, he knows in the background what's been instructed and what's been executed well and what hasn't been executed well. So look, I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt. And the last bit, he said, now he wants us to keep him for underperforming in the same league. But because we're in the round 16 of a cup he hasn't won, that should keep him. Hypocrite, arrogant, disrespectful, and should get sacked regardless. Okay, someone's already replied to that. Football fans replied to that. But I don't think that's hypocritical. I don't think it's hypocritical. I think now he wants us to keep him for underperforming in the same league. I don't know. Look, I think you need to see out a little bit more of the season. We're just over halfway through. You've still got a lot of games to play. A lot can change. And now we don't have midweek football until mid-March. We can maybe go on a run and we can maybe pick up some points for our next few games. So I think you need to be a little bit patient with this. Also, don't forget the next round, we've got teams like oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to double check because I remember it was Club Brugge. It was Club Brugge or Galatasaray, or Juventus or Atletico Madrid. So that's who we could face in the next round. And I think our next two legs is going to be the home leg first, I think. So I need to double check on that. But look, in the main, I think it was a positive performance. Very happy for Frank, very happy for the squad. Hopefully, chin up now. We go into the next game. We've got a bit of momentum behind us. We're on the up. Can we go on a bounce? And look, I don't want to be hearing anything about throwing away that City game, in relation to what's happening at the top of the league, because that's not our concern. We need to stay in our lane and do our best with what we've got, considering where we're at in the league. So what was your guys' thoughts on this game? How did you feel after it? Are you excited that we get to progress through Europe? Are you excited that you get to see some more Spurs from the Stands vlogs? coming up, because I'm going to be, obviously, I'm on the gold ticket, so I'm going to be going to those games. But I said last night, is it too soon to book Budapest? And some of you were like, yes, it is. But I have to tell you, we booked to Bilbao after the quarters. So look, it's probably a bit premature at this stage, but I did actually look after we won the Europa last year. I did actually look at Budapest, and all the accommodation even then was sold out for the next year for the Champions League final. So we'll see what happens. We can't get too ahead of ourselves. We take it game by game. But as far as I'm concerned, the trajectory is on the up. And as long as these players can start gelling together, start clicking, then hopefully, we can start seeing the progression that we want to see and start picking up the results that we want to have. So I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.